Hello, folks. Allow me to introduce Holly. Hallelujah, Holly. No, it's Holly. Holly Lewis.
I love it.
She's the CEO of Holly Lewis Coaching. She helps stressed out people, high achievers in tech to calm down. So, kind of get that inner peace and without burning themselves out. She's passionate about helping others learn that they are in complete control of how they think and feel at all times. A very true thing. She's been doing this 30 plus year career in the IT sector, software development, and she's also done coaching. And she helps her clients reprogram their habitual think, feel, do cycles to calm down, get what they want out of life. Over to you, Holly.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. I am going to share my screen and we're going to go through a little presentation, but I want you to stop me if you have questions. And I expect this to be a fairly dynamic session. I'm going to move some stuff around so that I have plenty of space. All right. Let me present. All right. Can everybody see my screen? All right. Thumbs up. All right. So today I want to talk to you about the secret to reducing chronic stress. And it's just one little secret. And if you get nothing else, just remember the secret. It'll help you. So today I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you the story of chronic stress. I want to talk about the self-coaching model a little bit, which is something that I am certified in to use. That is a method from Brooke Castillo, if you don't know her. I want to talk about how your brain works and how you can actually reprogram your brain to have less stress. And then we'll get into some Q&A if you guys have some questions. So like Bernie said, I've been in tech for over 30 years. And I had the mindset of a high achiever, which was that I had to accomplish more in a better way than anybody else in order to prove that I was just as good. So I was always trying to prove myself. And that ended up with me chronically stressed, beating the crap out of myself all the time, and really lacking fulfillment in my life. And that, I think Tanya talked about fulfillment, right? I started having chest pains when I was 50 years old. And I knew I had to do something different. My dad actually died of a heart attack when he was 58. And I knew that, oh my goodness, something's got to change here. And, I thought that it was just my weight, that I was just overweight, and that was what my problem was. So I actually got a coach in 2019 to help me lose weight. I thought, right? I thought it was a diet plan or whatever. Well, it turned out she was a mindset coach and she had been trained in the model, and she helped me really see what it was that my mindset was the problem, and that it was actually my mindset around time and achievement and that kind of thing that was causing a lot of my problems. It was causing me to overeat, to buffer anxiety. It was causing me to be anxious about time and put a lot of pressure on myself. And it just it was not going well. And I really was scared shitless, truthfully. I thought for sure, oh my gosh, if I don't do something different, I'm going to die. And so you can see my pictures between June 2019, June 2020, and then June of 2021, right? I have made a total transition in my life based on what I'm going to teach you here today. So I did find out that my mindset was actually the problem. And I'm really, really excited to share that knowledge with you so you can be on your way to having more joy in your life, more joy, more calmness, and more balance. So I want to talk to you about chronic stress. Like I think Bernie mentioned earlier, a little bit of stress in your life is good, right? And the stress response, it has a purpose. But when you are in a state of flight, fight, freeze, or fawn for more than 50% of your experience, that is chronic stress. The thing is, when you're in a chronic stress response, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. Now, I want you guys to think about this on a scale of 1 to 10. What would you say your level of chronic stress is right now? And hold on to that answer. And why do you think you're stressed? All right. And we'll get back to that. So, chronic stress is a problem because it takes your body out of equilibrium, which could lead to health issues like I had, chest pains and all kinds of other things, headaches, lack of sleep. It interrupts your sleep patterns, which is necessary for your reset and repair of your system. It also increases the likelihood that you'll engage in behaviors that feel good right now, but really aren't healthy in the long run. And an interesting thing is when you're stressed, when you're in stress response, you get tunnel vision and tunnel hearing, which actually leads to not being able to see the full picture and a lack of creativity. It is impossible to be creative while you're stressed. It's not possible to do. And it does lead to a lessened productivity and lack of focus on your goals and all of the things, and increases your feelings of self-doubt and feelings of somehow being broken and a lack of balance. It blocks joy, and it also increases your likelihood of fatigue and exhaustion. How many of you guys have ever felt some of these symptoms? Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny because our minds are like, "Oh, you know what? Stress is just a part of work, right? Stress is just a part of being human." And that is true to some extent. When it's consuming your life, it's not. It's a problem. And that's where I was, right? I didn't realize that I had a problem with this until I started having health issues. So, what I want to stress to you all right now, no pun intended, is that chronic stress is a problem. And whether or not you're having health effects from it or not, the time to do something about it is now. So the way that we think that chronic stress works, and this is something that we're all taught, right? Society teaches us this, our parents teach us this. We're taught that the circumstances are to blame for stress. So money's to blame for stress, our achievements are to blame for stress. Things my crazy coworker said to me causes me stress. Time causes me stress, my boss causes me stress, or the news, or COVID, or whatever. That's what we're taught to believe, is that all of those things outside of us is what causes stress. I am here to tell you that is not true. The way that chronic stress actually works is what we think about those circumstances outside of us drives how we feel, which in turn triggers a stress response. So, how you think about money or your money situation causes you to feel something, which then causes a stress response. How you think about time. Time is a very common one. How you think about time and whether you have a time prosperity mindset versus a time scarcity causes you think about time. It causes you maybe time anxiety. Maybe you feel anxious and then you have a stress response. So, we're going to get into what this model looks like and how you can actually recognize what is going on here. So, this is the self coaching model that I mentioned earlier from Brooke Castillo, which is the school, the life coach school, which I'm a certified life coach. And what it is basically you have circumstances that happen, which are just the facts. These are things that in a court of law, you could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was true. It doesn't have any adjectives involved in the circumstance. All right. So I am here on this Zoom with you today. That's a fact. It can be proven in a court of law. It's being recorded. Everybody can see that I'm on here. The T in the model is that we have thoughts about those circumstances. So let's say the C is COVID. And your thoughts about COVID drive how you feel. And then your feelings in turn drive your stress response. And then your stress response creates the result of chronic stress. So just remember this model because we're going to come back to it in a little bit. But there's all kinds of literature. If you go to thelifecoachschool.com, there's a free training on there about the self-coaching model that you can investigate. So why the model matters is because we are in 100% complete control of our thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. And that is because all of our thoughts are optional. You've been taught that they're not, but I'm here to tell you they are. The worst thing that can ever happen to you is an emotion. I'm going to let that sink in. Fear is an emotion. Humiliation is an emotion. Grief is an emotion. The worst thing that can ever happen to us is an emotion. And emotions are just vibrations that last about 90 seconds. You can absolutely change your result of chronic stress by changing what you think. And you probably only have 2 to 5 habitual thought patterns that are leading to chronic stress. So I want to talk a little bit about the brain and tie this all together for you after this. So you might be thinking right now that, Holly, it's just not true that our thoughts drive our feelings, actions, and results. And like I said, that's because you've been taught by your parents, society, all the things that circumstances are to blame for how you feel. And it's just not true. Your thoughts are simply your perception of the circumstances. So I want to dive into how your brain actually works. I want to talk about our default programming, what a habit looks like, and then I want to talk about three specific parts of the brain: the cerebellum, which is the autopilot, prefrontal brain, which is your CEO, and then the watcher. All right, so our default programming is the motivational triad. And if you've never heard of this, it's basically exert the least amount of effort, avoid pain, and seek pleasure. Every single one of our brains is programmed this way. So if you think about an operating system in a computer, this is like the registry settings. Okay, so your registry settings are avoid anything that's hard or difficult. Always choose easy, and to make as many things a habit as possible, and to stick with the familiar and the comfortable. You also are programmed to avoid physical and emotional pain. You are programmed to stay safe by invoking the stress response. And your brain does not know the difference between real physical danger and fear. Humans are the every other animal has a stress response based on physical. You also are programmed to avoid unpleasant things, pleasure, and dopamine hits. So our default program has not evolved. That's why you see this little caveman guy here. It's the same as the caveman days. No different. Then we have the anatomy of a habit. So I don't know how many of you have read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. If you have not, highly, highly recommend that book. It is excellent. And basically, you have a habit loop, which you have a cue, then you have some routine that happens to get a reward. So the cues for stress are time, location, people, actions, feelings. And your routine is this thought, feeling, and action loop or inaction. And then rewards actually satisfy a craving for something. And it's exactly the same as the model, right? Which is CTFAR. But it's been repeated so many times that it imprints itself in a neural pathway in your brain. So the cerebellum, or your autopilot brain back here, is your operating system that is programmed with the motivational triad and these learned stories that you were socialized with all of your life that have become habits. All right. Think of it as that, you know, in a Windows operating system, you have accessories of Notepad and the calculator. Those are just stories, little programs that are automatic. We don't even think about them. They always come with the operating system. Our predictive engine is here. It is super, super fast. So that's why you feel like you're doing something against your will. So I don't know about you guys, but every night at 8 o'clock, I find myself in the kitchen before I even knew that I was going in the kitchen. And I find myself with my hand on something and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what is happening? Right? I'm trying to lose weight. I don't want to be snacking, but here I am with my hand or standing there looking in the refrigerator before I even realized that I went in there. And that is because they're just models that have been learned and habitualized to create a neural pathway. We have tens and thousands of these stories. And guess what? Your brain doesn't care if they're true or not, only that they've been repeated. So think about that. What you learned as a child that was repeated and repeated and repeated is back there on autopilot. For me, one of my stories was that it is safer to be perfect. I learned that as a child, that it was unsafe not to be perfect. And that has lived with me for many, many years until I realized that I had that story. So your prefrontal up here, your CEO brain, that's what's responsible for complex thinking, decisions, planning your dreams and goals, resisting urges. That's where determination is. This is where your free will is. And it's responsible for learning new things, but it's very slow and it's very deliberate and it takes a lot of energy to run this part of your brain. So remember what I said about the operating system. Conserve energy. So it's going to try and put as many things on autopilot as it possibly can so that you don't have to use the front part of your brain because it takes a lot of energy. This is when they say, you hear people say, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. That's what they're talking about, right? So it's talking about the free will portion, the CEO part of the brain. The other thing that's in this prefrontal cortex is what's called the watcher, right? And it is really your self awareness where you can either hear or see what you're thinking and that you can decide to think something different. It is very elusive, and most people don't realize that they can do this. It has to be cultivated. It requires a lot of motivation to actually use it. And it does grow with mindfulness practices. So, one of the things that I'm going to offer you later is some ways to really cultivate the watcher. So the secret is, and if you remember nothing else, remember this: chronic stress is a habit that is driven by your thoughts. There are common cues, which are the circumstances like time, money, achievement, relationships, or feelings. The thought and the feeling is what you do on autopilot when you're triggered by the cue. That feeling that you get makes you feel unsafe. Remember, motivational triad, we like to be safe, right? If you feel unsafe, that triggers the stress response. And that reward of that loop is a cocktail of adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine. And we love it. How many of you have ever said, I work better under pressure? I would say you're addicted to the stress response, which is this little adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine cocktail, right? I used to say that all the time. Oh, I'll put it off because I work better under pressure. It's a bunch of horse shit, I got to tell you. All right. So the modern stress response, you guys have all heard of fight, flight, and freeze, right? Now there's a lot of research out there that there's actually a fourth stress response, which is called fawning. Okay. So the fight, rather than it being punching somebody or, whatever, it's really anger and aggression, right? Whether it's outward or inward. So a lot of like self-criticizing behavior, being really hard on yourself, kind of whipping yourself to do more, do more, do more. That's like the fight response. The flight response has to do with perfection and urgency, having these obsessive thoughts and being a nonstop doer. The freeze response has to do with hiding, fading out, numbing for comfort, maybe with food, maybe with alcohol, maybe with cigarettes, maybe with whatever. And the fawning is people pleasing, over apologizing, no boundaries, taking responsibility for things that are not yours to own. Here's the thing: as a child, you learned one or two of these responses as your default response. And I guarantee that you're still doing them today, because I know I am. My default responses, my dad was a perfectionist. And so half the time I have a flight response. And then on the other hand, my mother was a people pleaser. And so I have a fawn response as well. So I catch myself all the time not wanting to say no or being overly concerned that people aren't going to like me. Right? It's all this story that you have from when you were a kid. So let's talk a little bit about proactive measures to really bring the watcher to the forefront. So we're going to slow down. You want to slow down your automatic responses and create some evidence for calm. And the best way that I know of to do this is to create morning and evening routines and to start small and incrementally add to your routine. As an overachiever, I know I'm an overachiever. I wanted to do all the things. Oh, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to journal. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Well, guess what? When you do that, your brain's going to fight you because it's not easy. So you got to work with your brain and you got to make it easy. So some recommendations is a gratitude practice, writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day, doing some planning every morning, journaling, thinking about your goal every day, exercising. And one of the really key things that I recommend is no outside input until you're ready to start your day. Your brain depending on what it hears, it's going to go to work trying to fix a problem. So if you let Instagram in or Facebook in or LinkedIn in or your email in, the news in, whatever, it's off to the races. There's no time for it to say, oh, we want to use the CEO to plan our day or be intentional about our day. So I really recommend that you start small and maybe just push it back by 15 minutes. I'm going to wait 15 minutes. You know, I was addicted to email myself. I was looking at work email the minute I woke up before I ever got out of the bed. And I was doing the same thing at night. I was reading email until I went to bed. And so basically I was working 14 hours a day because email is work. Even though your brain doesn't like to admit that, email is work. All right, on the evening side, cultivate, review what went well. And then what didn't go well and what's a 1% improvement for tomorrow. You know, our brains, we all have a negativity bias, and you have to actually cultivate positivity. And when I first started doing this, it was really hard for me to come up with 3 things of what went well. I could give you 30 things of what didn't go well. And I've been doing this for about a year and a half. And now I can give you 30 things that went well. And it's sometimes I'm really hard pressed to say what didn't go well. So you have to train your brain to get over the negativity bias. Another thing that's really helpful, specifically if you have problems sleeping, is to purge anything that you're thinking onto a piece of paper and then say, okay, I'm going to take care of this in the morning and put it aside, because your brain actually thinks, oh, wait, he or she did something. There's a plan. I can let it go. So that's a trick if you guys have problems sleeping. And then again, turn off outside input at least an hour before bed. And you can do some breath work as well. There's a great book. It's by James Nestor, and I think I have it in the appendix, called Breath. If you haven't read it, it's really good. About how you can invoke your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems by some different types of breathing, and how our breathing actually has so much to do with the stress response. All right, let's talk about reactive measures. Now, how many of you guys know when you're in the stress response? I'm not surprised by that answer, because I actually didn't know I was in the stress response either, right? I just thought that was normal, right? Like my heart was racing, or like I had tightness here or tightness in my chest. I didn't realize that that was the stress response. So a quick tip I could give you is anything above the navel that you're feeling is probably a stress response. Because non-stress, you actually feel below the navel, right? Like feelings of good, happiness, joy, calm, you actually feel those below the navel. And so if you're having any kind of situation where you like have tightness in your throat, or your jaws are clenched, or you have tightness in your shoulders, you're in the stress response. So recognize when you're in the stress response, which is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You want to name it, you want to describe it. And the most important thing is you want to allow it. You do not want to resist it, because resisting makes it worse. So allow it. A biohack that I can recommend is to do a box breathing technique, which is 4. So it's basically inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. And then another trick is to do it like this, where you're only breathing out of your left nostril. Because believe it or not, your left nostril is connected directly with your parasympathetic nervous system. your right nostril. If you're ever tired, just FYI, and you want to wake up, do the opposite. It'll wake you right up. Then what I want you to do is to get, once you're calmed down, I want you to get curious and write down, why were you stressed? What were you thinking? And use your CEO brain to do a model. What was the circumstance? What was the thought I was thinking? What was the feeling? What were the actions that I took? And then what was the result of that? And then really question that thought. Is that thought really true? And or is that thought, maybe you think it's true, but maybe ask yourself, is it helpful? If it's not helpful, choose to think something new. And then what you really want to do is pay attention to catch yourself having that thought that creates stress. You catch yourself, this is the watcher, right? You hear yourself or you see yourself say it, and you stop yourself and say, no, we're thinking this now. And it all has to do with repetition. Remember when we talked about the habit brain? It's repetition, repetition, repetition. So the more that you can catch yourself thinking the old thought that you want to replace and replace it and practice, the easier it'll be to replace that neural pathway. And James Clear says that it takes about 66 days to create a new habit. So it's not something that can be done overnight, but it's simple. You just got to catch yourself doing it. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about some stress thoughts versus some calm thoughts, and then we'll get into your questions. So some stress thoughts are, I'm so far behind. I used to say this all the time. And it caused me anxiety every time. I was anxious every time I thought that, and had a stress response every time. Versus, I'm exactly where I need to be. So now I think I'm exactly where I need to be. I have plenty of time. So thinking things like this is a disaster causes anxiety, stress, and causes the stress response. I don't have time versus I have plenty of time. Again, causes the stress response. I don't know what to do versus I can figure this out. And this isn't working versus this is working. So I want to go through just a couple of models really quick to show you how this works. So the first one, let's take time as the circumstance. I don't have enough time to get it all done. Might be something that you're thinking about time, and that's going to make you anxious, and you're going to avoid by buffering or overthinking and procrastinating, which is the flight and the freeze response. And you end up using time inefficiently and end up with not enough time to get it done. So that thought of I don't have enough time to get it all done results in you not having enough time because you don't use your time efficiently because you're in the stress response. Another is achievement. Maybe you're thinking I have to hit my goals to be worthy, which results in pressure. And what do we want to do with pressure? Avoid it by buffering, maybe taking on responsibility for others. So the flight and fawn response, and you end up not hitting your goals and beating yourself up, which adds more pressure. You just keep adding more and more pressure. Relationships. I'm not being valued might be your thought. I hear this a lot with my clients, talking about work. I don't feel like I'm valued, makes them resentful and leads to emotional outbursts or people pleasing to be valued or liked. which is the fight or the fawn response. And then you end up not valuing yourself because you're lying to be liked or valued. So you see how that works, the model? It's really, really interesting if you can slow yourself down to really hear what it is that you're thinking. And journaling is a great way to do that. Just free journaling or asking yourself a question every day and then going back to actually look at what did I write? What am I thinking? There's usually 2 to 5 thoughts that are driving the stress response. I'm not lying. Usually it's time. And we have a lot of thoughts about time because we've been socialized to believe that we need to be productive all the time, right? Or you could have a lot of thoughts about I'm not doing it right. That was me, right? Because I was trained as a child to be a perfectionist. So what about joy? So the more stressed you are, the less joy you can feel. And so minimizing your stress response is really, really critical in order to bring more joy into your life. So joyful is a feeling in the model. So what do you have to be thinking to feel joyful? Right? I encourage you to go look up the definition of joyful. It is not I was actually surprised by this because I thought joyful just meant, bubbling happiness. But really it means a state of peace. Right? It has various meanings, but it's happiness and peace. Right? That calm feeling and just being joyous and grateful about your life. It's an amazing place to be. I am so excited that I've been able to get myself there and that I've gotten my clients there. It is an amazing place to be. And like Bernie said at the beginning, you don't have to endeavor to reduce your stress 100%. It's just 50%. Life is 50-50. It's meant to be a human experience. There are some crappy things that happen during our lives. You need to feel that. And then there's the good stuff that happens. But if you're not having enough of the good stuff, it's because you have too much stress. All right. What questions do you all have for me?
Holly, that was really awesome. So, what are things that compound stress? We have our perception, but what are things that we do that help compound stress or exasperate it?
Yeah, a lot of it is the story, I would say, Bernie, is what story do you have? Do you believe that you never have enough time? Or, do you believe that you're never going to have enough money or achievement? I know for me, one of the things was I tied my self-worth to achievement. And so I was constantly trying to achieve to prove that I was a good person and that I was enough. And I ended up having to detangle that, right? Now I achieve because I want to, not because it means I'm a better person. We're
So,
all worthy.
so would diet or sleep or Red Bull count as a force multiplier?
Yeah, well, that's buffering, right? So where you're buffering with a substance, right? To try and make yourself feel different. So anytime that you're trying to manipulate how you feel with a substance, that's what's called buffering, right?
Okay.
And that definitely has an effect on your health, right? Not only on your health, but it makes you more susceptible to having even more stress responses. Anybody else have a question?
Yes, Holly.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you not to, could you stop sharing your screen and then we'll
Sure.
see everybody. Thanks, Holly.
Yep.
Go ahead. There we go.
Here. There we go.
There we
Hi.
go.
Okay.
There we go. Hi, Holly.
Hi.
I loved your presentation. It was really eye-opening and inspiring. One thing I'd like to ask you is if I only had one thing to do, one thing to implement, and I'm a big fan of his as well, Atomic Habits, love
It's
it.
a great book. Yeah.
So if we were to implement one thing,
Mm-hmm.
what would that suggestion be?
Yeah, for me, it would be implement one thing that is going to help you cultivate the watcher in your brain to be able to hear and see what it is you're thinking, right? And that's like a meditation habit, gratitude, journaling, anything that'll slow you down. Because you have to slow down in order to be able to hear your thoughts. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day. You're never going to hear them all. But you can slow down to at least hear the habitual ones that you're having and recognize those. I'm a big fan of the Calm app. And you know, I know there's Headspace and that kind of thing, but I like the daily Calm. It's like 10 minutes, right? And it just gets me to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm relaxed, I'm calm now. I would say that, and not allowing the input in. I stopped watching television about 2 years ago. I'm way calmer.
It must have been the political debates.
It was just TV in general, right? Because like if you it's, and I could go off on a whole line of thinking here, but like just notice when you're watching TV how many times they associate food with happiness. I don't want that crap in my brain.